Chapter 12. Two Houses. The boys retreated to their cave in the hills, so Corrine walked a frightened Drew back to her village, a small collection of wooden houses in the middle of fields of cocoa, sugarcane, and figs. It was evening now, and the farmers, covered in sweat and soil, were just returning from the fields with a satisfied look of work well done on their creased faces. A group of people, Corrine counted 7, all with Drew's large almond-shaped eyes and thick black hair, came down the road laughing and arguing. "You smell like dung, Arjun. Have you been playing with the cows again?" a tall girl asked. "How do you know what I smell like, Fatima? Can you smell anything over that stink coming from your armpits?" The boy shoved the girl, and she kicked dust into his face. "Aye, watch it!" a smaller boy shouted. "You're quarreling with him, not me." "Who can see you there?" the tall girl asked. "You're too small to be walking with the rest of us." "Yeah, Karma. Why don't you go to market with Mommy and the baby?" another small one said. "I'm not a baby," Drew said. She twirled the end of her hair in one hand and curled the other hand in a tight fist. "You're not 1 year older than me, Vidya." Vidya and the rest of Drew's siblings looked down at her and smiled. "Where'd you come from?" Karma asked. "You're done playing in the market?" "Are you done playing in the field?" Drew shot back. Fatima, who looked like the eldest, raised an eyebrow. "You're getting fierce. Pretty soon you won't be hanging on the back of Mama's sari anymore, eh?" "She was with me most of the day," Corrine said. "Not with your mommy." "This is my friend Corrine," Drew said. "Corrine, these are my brothers and sisters, and that's my father at the back." A tall, thin man wearing a homemade straw hat smiled at Corrine, then tipped his hat. "A friend, eh?" Fatima asked. "Why are you dressed like that, Corrine?" Arjun shoved Fatima in the arm and said, "Maybe she has those chicken legs like yours. They're easier to hide in pants." "They're my papa's clothes," Corrine explained. "It's what he wears to sell. And today I was selling at the market, so that getup is for business?" Fatima said with a nod of understanding. "So people won't give you any trouble, eh?" "You think she can't handle trouble?" Arjun asked. "Look at her. She looks like she brings the trouble herself." Corrine grinned. When they all got to the house, Drew's mother, Mrs. Rootsing, came out with her hands on her hips. "What took you all so long? Dinner's almost dried up from sitting in the pot." When she spotted Corrine, her face softened. "Are you staying for supper?" "No, miss. My papa will be expecting me," Corrine said. "At least have something to drink before you walk back," Mrs. Rootsing said. The girls followed her to the back of the house and watched as the goat let out a bleat of surprise when Mrs. Rootsing began to milk it. Corrine and Drew waited as Mrs. Rootsing went into the kitchen and came back with 2 warm cups of foam-covered milk. Instead of handing them to the girls, she hesitated on the unvarnished top step. "I thought Drew only brought one friend." Drew and Corrine turned around. Just behind them was a small boy, no older than 6. "Oh, look, it's your tail," Arjun called out from a window. "Come to a wag?" "Stop that, Arjun. Why don't you go wash the dung off yourself?" Mrs. Rootsing said sharply. She handed the milk to Drew and Corrine and went back to get another. Drew handed her cup to the boy, who immediately took a sip that left a line of froth on his top lip. The middle brother snickered. "Drink up, babies." "Who are you?" Corrine asked the little boy. "I'm Alan," he said. "I'm Corrine," she said. "Nice to meet you." "He lives over there," Drew said to Corrine. She pointed to a ramshackle house across the street. Mrs. Rootsing returned with the 3rd cup of milk. The 3 of them sipped their milk and listened to the clamor of the rest of the Rootsing family, talking, laughing, tossing things around. At a brief dip in the noise, Miss Rootsing said, "The sky's turning dark again, Corrine. You'd better head home before you get caught in the storm." The wind picked up suddenly, and Mrs. Rootsing's sari flapped against the bare wood floors. Corrine downed her milk and thanked Mrs. Rootsing. Drew's mother took the cup and turned to go back inside. As she did, a piece of her sari caught on a nail and ripped off. Corrine pocketed the smooth piece of cloth. She froze when Alan's mouth opened as if he was about to say something. Both of their eyes flashed to Drew, who was still sipping and looking out at the goats. Corrine put her fingers to her lip and Alan closed his mouth. Then Corrine darted off down the dirt road. "Don't let the Jumbies eat you," Arjun shouted after her. "Oh, shush," Mrs. Rootsing snapped. "Why don't you—" Whatever else she said was lost in the wind. As soon as Corinne lost sight of Drew's house, it began to rain again. By the time she got to her house, the sun had set and her clothes were soaked. She stopped a moment outside her house and took out Mrs. Rootsing's bit of sari cloth. It slipped around the tip of her fingers, smooth and soft. She went to the orange tree and said, "Mama, this is my friend's mother. You would have liked her." She dug a hole and buried Mrs. Rootsing's sari between the roots. As Corinne turned towards her house, a memory came to her of walking on small, pudgy feet through the house towards the open back door. She could see the ocean through the door and hear the waves crashing outside. Seagulls dove through the air and cried. She could even hear the leaves shaking in the wind. Just before she reached the door, her mama scooped her up in the arms. Her mama's mouth moved, telling her something, but her voice was lost in the sound of the seagulls, the waves, and the wind. Corinne blinked, and the vision of her mama was gone. She walked inside, expecting to see her father reading by lamplight. The voices she heard coming through the open kitchen door was a surprise. As she crossed the threshold, she saw her father leaning near the stove by a small pot of boiling water, laughing. Beside him was the woman in green. "Hello," the woman said. "Corinne, where have you been in all this rain? You're soaked." Her father ran towards her with a kitchen cloth. "How did you do at the market today?" Corinne untied the pouch from around her waist and dropped it on the kitchen table with a jingling thud. "I heard your daughter's oranges were the sweetest anyone had ever tasted. There weren't any left by the time I was ready to buy," the woman said. "Corinne, this is Severine," Pierre said. "I saw you in the market," Corinne said. "You didn't seem to be looking for any oranges." Severine's eyes darted to Corinne's father and then back to Corinne. "I had some business to take care of, but I came back later and you and your lovely oranges were gone," she smiled. Corinne looked at her father. "You know her?" "We met at the wharf today," he said. "She came to buy fish, but she didn't get there early enough. Then, when the rain started to pour down, I invited her to stay here until it was over." "There are more oranges on the tree. I could get you some now if you want," Corinne offered. "I would certainly pay you for them," Severine said. Corinne saw her father frown a little at Severine's suggestion of money. "No charge," she said. "Thank you. It's still raining, Corinne. Maybe you get them later?" Pierre said. Corinne shrugged. "I'm already all wet." She ran out quickly, picked out the closest oranges to the house, and returned to the kitchen. She cut one of them in half and squeezed some of the juice into the tea her father was brewing for himself and Severine. Pierre took a sip. "It's perfect," he said. "It makes you feel good from the inside out." Severine's eyes lit up when she took her first sip as well. She gripped the cup and slurped up the rest of the tea in several loud gulps. Then she shifted her eyes from Corinne to Pierre, who had fallen silent, watching her. Severine wiped her mouth and said, "You have a talent." Corinne was still dumbstruck, so Pierre nudged her a little. "It's not me," Corinne sputtered. "It's just a seed in the ground growing the way it should." "But not every seed that is planted brings such beautiful fruit," Severine said. "You made this happen, except the part that you played into it." "She's right, Corinne," Pierre said. He turned to Severine. "You should see the way she tends to the trees, making sure there are no pests, blowing warm air on them when the nights are too cold." Corinne's face flushed, and she smiled despite herself. "I learned it from my mama." Severine nodded. "Of course you did. Is that her?" She pointed to the wax figure on a shelf in the other room. Corinne nodded. "She made that too," Pierre said with a wink at Corinne. "You must miss your mama. I know what that is like, to lose somebody suddenly." She reached her hand out towards Corinne, but Corinne did not take it. After a moment, Severine let it drop back to her side. Pierre said, "Corinne, you should change out of those wet clothes before you get sick." He leaned over and kissed her on the top of the head, then pushed her out of the kitchen. When Corinne returned from changing, Severine was standing at the door. "It stopped raining," she said to Pierre. "I think it's time I went home." "Can you make it back in the dark?" Pierre asked. "You don't have a lantern." "I know these paths like they're written on my hand," Severine said. "Thank you for letting me keep dry in your house, Pierre." She looked at Corinne. "Maybe you will save me some oranges tomorrow?" "You will be at the market again?" Corinne asked as she squeezed more water out of her hair into a towel. Severine glided out into the darkness. Yes, you will see me again.